Hello, I am Aisha.
And Paula, your cultural hybrid mental health therapist.
Here to explore unfiltered and heartfelt conversations on core issues
that affect us as human beings. Get ready for honest, captivating,
and real stories that take you on a journey to navigate your life
in the best possible way.
So grab a seat
and stay with us on this episode of
Do We Have Your Attention? Welcome back, lovely listeners, to another episode of the Do We Have Your Attention podcast. As always, I'm your host, Aisha, and joining me is the fabulous
Paula. Hi.
Whoop, 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 whoop.
We are episode 9.
Can
we just kind of take that in?
Drum roll, please.
We've been doing this now. At least we can say we've been doing this now for 9 episodes.
Wow. Impressive. Congratulations.
Thank you. I would take that. Thank you. Congrats to you too as well. All right. Before we get started, I want to check in with you.
Wait, do you want to tell them the topic first? Or should we check in first?
Let's check in first.
Okay, no problem.
All right. So using your feelings color chart, how are you feeling today, Aisha?
I'm feeling yellow. Like I have a lot of positive energy, feeling optimistic.
Okay.
Considering the topic, I feel like
excited.
This will be good. What about you? How are you feeling?
That is so funny because even the topic conversation too as well is exciting me. So I definitely would say that I'm feeling a little bit of yellow and orange. So optimistic, happy, and then also confident.
Okay.
So a little bit of both. So you two, you're feeling excited about this topic. So I guess that means our listeners need to know what the topic is.
Yeah.
Do you want to
give
in
a quick drum roll, please? You do the drum roll. Okay. Today we're talking about conflict in relationships.
Conflict.
I love the background. The background effect. I love it. Yeah, we're talking about conflict in relationships. Ooh.
A big sigh.
I know.
It's going to be definitely a good conversation because I think that this is something that people can relate to. Would you say so?
I agree. I think everybody will be able to relate to this topic because we've all in one way, shape, or form experienced conflict in our relationships. So
say it louder.
We've all in one shape or the other experienced conflict in our relationships.
Let's get started.
Okay. So, what do you think are some common sources of conflict in relationships? Let's just dive right into it. We're not sugarcoating nothing today.
Yeah, that is absolutely fine. I am going to obviously start with the most common. Communication. If I have $1 for every time I have shouted communication in my sessions with my clients, I probably would be very rich right now, to be very honest with you.
People are not communicating effectively.
I don't even feel like, I know people say effective communication, but I think communication, the essence of communication is for it to be effective in the first place. If it's not effective, it's not communication. I don't know what it is, but it's not communication.
You're just shouting at yourselves. It's unproductive, basically.
Yeah. So one major source of conflict in relationship, communication. I would also say lack of accountability sometimes too as well.
That's a big one.
A major source. Finances. I hate to say it, but you would be surprised the level to which money and finances and beliefs around finances plays a role in conflict. I
agree.
think also differences, and I'm not really sure how to narrow this down. I just mean it can be differences in upbringing. It can be differences in cultural backgrounds. It can be differences in the way in which we communicate.
Yeah.
But I would say differences is a very big source of conflict because, sometimes someone said something to me recently where they were saying, okay, I don't know if this is something to put in our podcast episode, but it's okay. I'm not saying who said it. we were talking about the US, and they said something that was very interesting. They said they don't think Americans don't understand what is different from them. When something seems different, whether it's culturally or whatever the case might be, they seem to have like a negative reaction to difference. And I think that's very true if you think about in-group, out-group mentality. But I would also say as human beings, we can be very judgmental, very critical, have negative reactions to difference. So when something that doesn't really something that seems different from how we perceive our world. So I would say that differences is a big one as well. There's many other ones, but I want to hear from you. Like, what would you say are some common sources of conflict in relationships?
I definitely agree with the ones you've said so far. And just to touch on a bigger part of differences is personality, because everybody has different personality. And I think in the recent years, I've started to notice that when we talk about the communication issues, sometimes it comes from the bigger personality differences and just lack of understanding or willingness to understand. But I also think jealousy and insecurity
That's a good one. That's actually a good one.
Yeah, because a lot of people wouldn't want to admit that. But something I've noticed is like sometimes if someone is on a path, you imagine yourself in that same path, but it's not like your time is still going in a gradual process, but that person has it. I think sometimes, it leads to conflicts because people start bringing up issues or, saying slight comments. Like recently on social media, I've been seeing people saying, I cut my friend off because I noticed that they were jealous of me, or they started saying comments like,
stuff like
when
that
I have success, things happening to me, instead of them celebrating with me, they start like saying these underlying comments that's coming off as you're not happy for me, but that's just because of the insecurity that's attached to you not being in the place that you are observing the person has already gotten to. So that, and I think trust issues too. Trust is a big foundation in friendships. And I think a lot of times when that's compromised, it can start leading to conflict in relationships.
So that is very, very true. Trust is such a huge factor. But I also realized that I guess we could say for the novice person, we haven't actually explained what is conflict, if that makes sense. Like when you think about conflict, because sometimes some people see conflict as fighting. Some people see conflict as disagreement. Some people see conflict as avoidance. Like I guess we have our own different subjective definitions of conflict. So when you think about conflict, and I guess in the context of relationships, what comes to mind for you specifically?
I think about conflict as like just misunderstandings based off having different opinions or different perspectives about a particular situation. So I started learning to stop looking at conflict as this big negative thing, because we're all entitled to our own perspectives, right? We're all entitled to our own opinions. So I just say it more as I have an opinion that this person may not agree with. I may not necessarily agree with their opinion, but how can we come together to respect each other's opinions without it becoming like this bigger issue that's causing a big lapse in our friendship or just general relationship? How do you define conflict?
That's such a good way to put that. It's very true. I think just similar to what you have said, it's disagreement. Like I see as disagreement between obviously people, can be two people, three people. But it's just people who have, I guess you could say, opposing views or opposing opinions on a subject matter. And the goal of conflict is not necessarily for one person's view or belief system to be right and the other one to be wrong.
But that's the issue. That's what people want.
Okay, let's end the episode. We've already established what the issue is.
We've just got into... We've identified the main things.
Now we see it as I'm right, you're wrong. I've won, you've lost. As opposed to it's just a difference in opinion that leads to a disagreement, but you come to some type of understanding or resolution. That's what makes it at least productive conflict, so to speak. Yeah. With that being said.
Good way of summarizing that.
I have a question for you.
Hey, good. Please make it a nice question.
You can make it a hard question.
Nice.
Oh, a nice question.
Nice.
Well, you can take this however you want to take it, but I am very curious though, to be honest with you.
Hey,
I would love for you to share any personal experiences that you've had where you feel as though conflict actually taught you something valuable in general, or something valuable about yourself in whatever relationship. By the way, we don't mean just romantic relationships. We mean familial,
for sure,
we mean platonic, we mean professional, which however
family.
you want to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very great question. Ooh. I'm laughing because one thing I learned about myself in past years was that I wasn't even communicating properly. Like I thought I was, but I wasn't, in the sense that I thought that just expressing how I felt or telling people how I felt, sharing my point of view was like me communicating and trying to result into conflict resolution. But of course, I found out that was not effective in any way, simply because, again, it was going back to, well, I'm right. I'm just expressing to you how what you did hurt me. And you have to understand what you did hurt me, and you must hear me. You must validate me. And I learned about myself, like, even if the person is explaining what they're saying, I don't care, because to me, it's like, well, you hurt me. Before I can even hear anything you're telling me, you have to validate that.
Have to be validated and seen first.
Exactly. And then, obviously, in therapy, I learned that wasn't effective.
Right.
Like, do you? And I was like, oh, really? Because they hurt my feelings. It's always about my feelings. And my therapist was like, it's about your feelings, but it's also about their feelings too. Yep. Hello, it's two people in this situation. It's not just you. Yep. And so I started to learn that, yes, I can express how I'm feeling, but I also need to give the other person space to express how they're feeling, and kind of come to the conclusion, like, it's okay if you were hurt, but maybe the person didn't mean to hurt you. Yeah. And you have to be willing to hear that rather than jump into conclusion and just kind of cut them off, or, just be like, I'm not interested in keeping this relationship, whatever, or kind of be resentful to them, basically. So that's what I learned. I learned in the recent years that I was not a great communicator. I also learned that I pick up on little things that may not be necessary to pick up on. Like if somebody is like sharing how they're, communication is verbal, non-verbal cues, right? Yeah. But I noticed that sometimes I zone out of the verbal and I focus on non-verbal cues, which is not
what
really...
do you mean? Do you mean that you're sort of watching and observing their
I'm over observing, which is like, people are allowed to express how they feel when they're passionately expressing without me taking...
I feel like I'm the FBI. I feel like I'm the FBI sometimes, to be very honest with you. I'm like, they blinked once.
I know.
They blink once? They blinked twice.
You said sorry, but your leg was crossed.
They looked up to the left, or they looked up to the right. And then there's this TV show called Lie to Me. I don't know if you know it. No. It's like a behavioral psychologist or scientist that he studies human behavior, and I was so obsessed with it growing up. I still rewatch it even till today. And he would go and say something like, the client looked up and then gazed to the left. That means they're actually trying to recall a memory, or they looked up and they gazed to the right. That means they're trying to basically saying they're lying. So I'll be like, they looked up and they looked left. Are they lying? Are they saying the truth? I can definitely relate.
You know what? It feels good to be validated in that way. Thank you for telling me you do the same.
I don't know if it's just found out, like you said, but it might be.
It probably is. It probably is. But what I found out was that wasn't making me become an active listener in the conversation. So I'm missing out on the person genuinely expressing themselves because I'm looking for other cues to show me that they're lying, which is so very messed up to say. I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, I know if I talk to this person about what's bothering me, I just know they will lie. I learned I have to stop that mentality, because then I'm already going in there with defense and looking for evidence to validate that thought that I had. So enough of me, please. I feel like I'm airing myself.
It's good though, but this is very helpful because you see how you shared that and I could relate with it. I think there's a lot of people who can relate to as well. Sometimes we get very self-critical and we're hard on ourselves. This conversation is not to sort of judge anyone's conflict style. It's just more so in understanding, like, is this thing really beneficial for you Is it healthy? Are there better ways to be able to actually go about navigating conflict? That's not stressing you out, and it's also helping your relationships. With that being said, there's 5 conflict styles. And I'm just going to sort of summarize it just a little bit, and I guess you can tell me which one, based off on this example you gave, which one you identify with. So competing is one, which is more of my way, my way, my way, my way. Right? My way or the highway, as they say, getting what you want no matter what. Some people win, some people lose. We spoke about that. There is avoiding, which is sort of just like denying the issue at hand, pretending nothing. Those, to be honest with you, people who are like that trigger me.
I know, same.
They trigger me for some reason. But avoiding and just pretending like nothing is fine, or walking away from conflict and thinking you're doing the right thing by just walking away. And
being
we're not
quiet,
saying a volatile argument where walking away helps. We're saying more so being avoidant. Then there is also compromising, which is, okay, halfway, you win some, you lose some. Each person's viewpoint matters. There is accommodating, which is more so giving into another person's opinion. So we can be a little bit of people-pleasing. Like people who fall under that people-pleasing category can fall under this a little bit, where it's, okay, fine, let's just do what you want to do. Let's just do what you want to do. And it seems like the person is being, and accommodation is not a bad thing. It's just when there's no boundaries within the accommodation, where it's just always agreeing, so you don't have to deal with conflict, then it becomes an issue. And then the last one being collaborating. Now this becomes more of, okay, it is our way, let's find a solution that makes everybody happy. Kumbaya, we're all doing well. So competing, collaborating, compromising, accommodating, avoiding. Which sounds a little bit like you.
You know what? I think I've adopted all those styles. It just depends on the relationship, I think. It just depends, because I would say, for example, for my parents, in the past, I would be going back and forth with them like it's a win or lose thing. And then after a while, I was like, nah, I'm just going to accommodate. I'm not in the mood to be going back and forth. If you say it's right, right?
Yeah.
In a romantic relationship in the past, I feel like I've been compromising. I don't want no problems, babe. Let's get on the right path. Let's be good. So I just compromise and, I'm sorry, whatever. In another relationship, it could still be win or lose or avoidant. It just depends. I think I've kind of adopted all of them, but I'm striving towards.
No, that's an excellent point, though. And I guess people who are listening can hear as well. That you can, it's not just, you don't really just identify with just one conflict style. Now you might identify a little bit more with one versus the other. And also it can be depending on the relationship as well, and the person and the context that those conflict styles can show up. That's so true.
Yeah. But now I'm striving towards collaborative, like regardless of the relationship, because it seems like that's the most effective one.
Yeah, I would say so too. I think I would say to some degree that some of the other ones too can be positive, like accommodating can be positive to an extent, compromising can be positive to an extent, collaborating obviously is more of that us versus the problem perspective. And of course, that would probably be identified as the best or the
most
healthiest,
most
effective one. I agree.
Tell
with
me
you,
about
though.
yours.
I think I'm a little bit of all. Now that I think about it, a little bit, not really avoidant, because clearly, I think I'm even one of those people who maybe likes to confront a little bit more. Now, I used to be avoidant. Maybe that's why it triggers me.
Maybe
that's why it triggers me.
I know what that looks like.
I would be that person that would just zone out. And I would be somewhere else, so I don't have to deal with conflict. But now I'm more so, I can definitely be accommodating with family. I've noticed with family, I kind of just go your way, so I don't have to deal, so to speak. I would say in relationships, friendships, I'm more of collaborating, sometimes compromising, where it's you win some, you lose some. At least I'm learning how to not, you know what you're saying about looking like the little things, like focusing on the little things. I'm trying not to make every single thing a problem. So that's something that I would say at least I noticed and learned about myself through personal experiences.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because you and I just had this conversation before we actually hopped on and started recording, where I told you that my boyfriend, he typically would say, oh, you like to keep score.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do you mean, like, I like to keep score? And like, you're just always keeping score of things. And that was something that I don't think I necessarily realized that I used to do. And then when I took a step back and I was like, wait, there is actually a point, because how come I remember this, and then I will get so exhausted by it. So I think to some degree, those will be the things that at least I can say that I have learned that are valuable lessons for myself, because it's not everything that is a fight. It's not everything that needs to be addressed sometimes.
Speaking of that, because that's sounding like win or lose, yeah? Because you're keeping score a little bit. You're trying to win some, see the ones that you can lose. See, maybe there's one that would be a big win for you.
Yep.
Versus a big loss. Why are we like this? I'm crying. The human brain is so funny. Okay. So speaking of that, because these things you were saying start to affect your quality of life or like the quality of your relationships. What are some signs that conflict is starting to affect your mental well-being or the quality of your relationships?
That's a very, very good question. I honestly think, and this is just a thought that just came to mind now. I think maybe if you're moving towards one conflict style a lot more, that can be an indication. So let's say if you're becoming too accommodating or you're becoming too avoidant, or you're becoming too of the competitor, so to speak, where it's my way, and not necessarily trying to find like an actual resolution, that's like a good indication that maybe to some degree the conflict is taking a toll on yourself or the relationship. Because what happens,
that's a good point.
After that, with something like being competitive, you then most likely become abrasive, you become a little reactive as well. With something like avoidance, you become a little more nonchalant and a lot more passive. So when you start seeing a lot of those behaviors, it can be a good indication. Like, for example, one of the things that lets me know when, and I would not even, I would say conflict because it's disagreement, right? When it's taking a toll on my mental health is when my anxiety goes up, because I have mentioned already that I have a history of struggling with anxiety, and I would say the symptoms of anxiety that I have are sort of good indications for me as like a signal, like, Paula, you need to take it easy, because I can ruminate and hyperfixate and play an argument or a conversation over over again, and I will be making edits in my head. And I don't know if this is something like, I've heard that this is a symptom of ADHD, and it's like something that's common with folks with ADHD, that we literally play it out. So we're arguing with ourselves, like arguing with the person in our head. And like going, okay, so this, remove this, edit that, do this, okay, correct that. And I have many moments where I zone out and that's happening, and I don't even realize that it's happening. And I have to reel myself back in. But what it indicates for me is that you're stressing your mind, you're stressing your body. Plus, the person that you're arguing with doesn't even know you're arguing with them, because you're arguing with yourself.
You're doing mental stress for no reason. Have you seen those tweets where people will be like, I'm in the shower practicing my argument? Because I do that too. I'm like, and then I'm going to say that, I'm going to say this. And then when the conversation comes, obviously you forget everything because it's going to look different. But constantly worrying about the conflict is going to cause a lot of stress for you or start affecting your well-being. Especially as you were saying, ruminating, playing it over and over again, thinking about what you could say, what the person's going to say. You're not even in control of that. So why are we doing this?
That part. But you just made a good point, though, that's probably another thing that can be an indication too as well. That if you're in a position where you're consistently trying to control the outcome of the situation, then to some degree that can easily take a toll on your mental health, but also is a good sign that the conflict, like, you are not necessarily resolving things in a healthy way. How about you? Like, what do you
Thank
think?
You for sharing.
What are some signs that maybe you've seen with with yourself or you've seen with other people that makes you know, like, okay, this conflict is not really being handled well, it's taking a toll on me?
Properly, yeah. For me, it's definitely the worry as well. I definitely play things over and over and over and over and over again in my brain. And I like to go prepared. Like you said, it's the control thing. I want to be in control of the outcome that I have no control over. So that. But I also noticed that for me, the things I've noticed in some of my clients, it manifests in physical symptoms. They will have the same headache for 1 week straight, or the same chest pain or stomach ache. And I'm like, because conflict-related stress can manifest as physical symptoms. I've definitely even experienced that too, where it's just like, to me, it manifests as tiredness physically. It's like, I'm fatigued. I don't want to do nothing. I just want to lay in bed, sleep, which can also lead to isolation. Yeah. Sometimes I know that if I'm isolating myself, it could be for other reasons, but if there's a relationship where I'm not having some level of happiness with, and there's something that we need to address, I definitely will isolate / just want to be by myself. I don't know. It's just like withdrawing yourself from any social interaction, because it's starting to affect my mood and all these other things.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because I don't think to some degree people realize that conflict in itself can actually really cause depression, or it can worsen depressive symptoms and anxiety symptoms. Yeah. Like, have you seen that happen even for yourself as well?
Oh, definitely. Like, can I?
Are you thinking about something?
I'm going to get in trouble.
What are you about to put into trouble?
I'm going to get myself. No, when I was really unhappy last year, and I knew I needed to have a conversation, but I didn't want to have it because I knew what the outcome would be. Like, it's one of those things where, you know, regardless of how much you communicate, you just know what the outcome would be. And I kept avoiding it. And I was already in a bad place. Like, I was definitely depressed. So that was definitely adding more to my depression. It was my mood, my appetite, my sleep. My sleep was already bad, but it got worse. I was having dreams about the conversation. That's how bad it was.
That's deep.
Very deep. And then one day I was like, yeah, Aisha, you can't do this no more. You have to be at peace and to even better yourself. Because right now it's definitely affecting you. Like, it's making you feel more depressed. And I definitely isolated myself. I remember you'd be like, are you okay? Are you okay? And I think I pushed you back. I was like, I'm fine. There's nothing to talk about. I always tell Paula, like, I'm okay. I'm okay. I wasn't okay.
There's periods where I was hounding you.
Yeah, you were. You're like, I don't want to sound annoying, but Aisha, you can tell me. I'm like, I'm really okay. But eventually I was like, fine, I guess I'll tell somebody. But yeah, it definitely does impact. And I've even seen it with my clients before. And that one is mostly in, again, when you're avoiding / accommodating in your relationships, and you're already going through a mental health issue. And you know that having this conversation would partly help. Like, obviously you're not going to miraculously be better, but it would help, because now this situation is adding to the stress that you're already going through mentally. And because it's hard. It's very hard to have those conversations. So people would rather just be quiet and come to therapy and talk and complain about it, but not really feel 100% ready to get out of it.
That is so true.
So
I appreciate you sharing that, because it's not a fun experience. And my guess is like, it's not a fun experience, but you make such a good point too, as well, as how sometimes it's necessary for you to be able to share in that moment. And then sometimes you need to maybe just take that space for yourself and then reflect and then, okay, go, all right, it's time for me to share as well. One thing that was coming to mind for me is how much bias can play a role in unproductive conflict. You know, if you're going into a disagreement with someone and you're already anticipating how they might react or how they might think, because there's already a biased perception of that person. So it's almost like, you know how they say you can't use old information to inform a new situation. And as human beings, unfortunately, we're so good. Remember I said keeping score. Keeping score.
Because how else would you win?
We're so good at sort of using old information. So if this person acted this way at this time or at that time, then we use that to inform the new circumstance or the new issue at hand. And then unfortunately, that in itself already puts you in a position where that conflict is going to be unproductive. So it's very interesting. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that. And then we'll sort of talk about what are actual effective conflict resolution techniques for us to, I guess, use for ourselves, but then also for our listeners.
I agree. I think bias does play a role. I mean, you know the saying where nobody wants to be hurt twice. But if somebody has done something to you,
definitely not me.
Definitely not me. Definitely not me.
Once, shame on
but
you.
I think fool me twice.
Shame on me.
Shame on me. Shame on me. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think that's it. That's it. Yeah, but I think we all need to start learning that we're human beings, and as human beings, we are flawed and we make mistakes. And just because we make mistakes doesn't mean we should attach those mistakes to who we are as people. And I think that's where the issue lies. You know, I've had conversations with a lot of people, whether clients or friends, where it's like, one strike and you are off, you're cancelled. And I try to, at one point, when I was a teenager, I had that perspective as well. Like, you messed up, that's it. Like, there's no second chances. But obviously, as I started getting older, I was like, me too, I've messed up. Like, not intentionally try to hurt people. But again, because we're humans, we will hurt people, whether we like it or not. That's just how life is. You can't even control that. No matter how much you want to try not to hurt somebody, you will. But that's why you need to communicate and have conversations with people and be open-minded and not going in the bias. Because sometimes, especially due to people's life experiences or traumatic childhood experiences, they really, really take that as people are out here to hurt me. And because you have done this little thing to hurt, I can see you smiling because...
You know that
because you've done this thing to hurt me, you're cancelled
right now. Do I pretend or do I just accept
But it's okay. But it's okay. The only way to learn and to relearn and to rewire your brain is to give people the benefit of doubt. And hey, if they mess up again, it's not on you. That's on them. It has nothing to do with you. Now, I understand that, yes, you can make a decision of, okay, I've given this person multiple chances and clearly they're not willing to change and I don't want that in my life. That's different from going into it already coming in with the bias of the previous behavior. That is unfair because basically what you're saying is, you know, if you made a mistake, you would want other people to treat you that way. But we're not like that. We want people to give us grace. So that grace you want for yourself, you have to give people. Right. Exactly.
That is so true. Like a friend of mine said to me, and like obviously we're very cool friends. I didn't take it personal and we're just fun. It was fun because he's also a therapist. So I was like, why are you psychoanalyzing me right now? I don't even know what it was. It
Sounds
was
like
just
my client.
very little interaction of him maybe being quiet, and I'm not used to him being quiet. I went to pick him up, and I'm not used to him being quiet. Like, I'm used to him like jumping in the car going, hey, like, what's going on? So I'm just like, why are you so quiet? What's wrong? Why did I do something? And he was like, damn, Paula, like, relax. And then he made this comment.
Relax,
said,
girl.
Like, why are you always like, why does your brain go to the negative or like something is wrong first? And he said that as opposed to just like understanding that I'm a human being and I have varied emotions and moods.
Various moods.
And I was like, I feel so called out right now. And then what did I do? Like, become a little bit defensive. Like, why are you psychoanalyzing me? Who asked you? But
passive aggressive, quiet in the car.
Exact same day, something else happened in like an interaction with my boyfriend. But we're both laughing about it because the good thing is I'm aware. These are things I'm aware of and I'm working on. And he's also aware. We're having like a funny interaction, something that happens, and he was like, damn, like, what made your mind just go there first before just thinking like it could be a positive thing as opposed to a negative thing? And we're like, we busted into laughter, like going like, this mind of mine. At the same time, it also made me realize that to some degree, a lot of the conflict that we might even experience is created by us and our mind.
Definitely, of course.
It's created by our mind. So let's not say us in the sense
Minds,
where we're the ones that don't even realize that we're sort of partially responsible for it. So if we're looking less at the other person's behavior and more of our experience of the other person's behavior and perceived interpretation of the other person's behavior and what's happening, I'm pretty sure that we will be handling conflict very, very differently.
Very.
And this is me saying it as somebody who is currently as someone who's currently trying to figure it out.
That's the thing. You're aware. That's why we need to give ourselves grace, because you can be self-aware and know these things, but when you're
in the moment,
sometimes it's just easier to go into the coping mechanisms that you're used to that may not be necessarily effective. Sometimes you have to engage in the negative coping mechanism and be like, all right, that was not good now.
And the awareness is good, though. The awareness is good. And especially,
it's great.
It's great when you're also aware and you're doing something about it. But if you also heard what I said, I'm aware and I'm transparent with my partner about it. I'm aware and I'm even transparent with my sister, because she's my older sister. She's one of the people who I notice that we have conflict quite frequently. And it's literally just misunderstanding. We're very different people. We process differently. We react differently. So because of that, I started understanding that I need to really give her insights on how my mind works. So she's not seeing certain things and immediately also with her own interpretation or perceived interpretation. And then we're just at each other's throats, so to speak. And it's
going
crazy
back
because
and forth,
I have seen even an improvement in how we deal with those type of situations ever since I've been doing that. So if we're talking now about, I guess, effective conflicts,
resolution
techniques or strategies, that can be one. But I also want to just put a disclaimer there, because I'm giving insights about myself while also doing work on myself. Because some people will take it as, well, this is me, take it or leave it.
Those are the worst.
Well, I am like this, take it or leave it. So I think to some degree, it's understanding that giving insights for yourself, and I guess that's where we can say it's a little bit of vulnerability that comes with that transparency. And you brought up a good point as well earlier on, where you talked about your conflict style or how you are approaching things made it very difficult for you to become an active listener. And actively listening is a very, very
big part.
Common and very big part of conflict resolution strategies. Like, what else comes to mind when you're thinking about just effective ways for us to resolve conflict as individuals?
I was thinking about what you said about you expressing and trying to get your sister to understand and vice versa. And something that I always tell my clients in expressing your feelings is using I statements to express what you experience / are experiencing in the moment. Because a lot of times when we do express, we're talking about effective communication. People are pointing fingers and saying, you did this, you did that, blah, blah, blah. And again, when people hear that, they want to go into defense mode. They're not necessarily hearing that. Active listening now goes in the trash can, because they're not hearing that again, because now it just feels like an attack. So in order for them to actively listen to you, you need to use I statements. I feel hurt. I felt hurt. When that happened, I interpreted this as, so that the other person can understand how that interaction made you feel from your own perspective and not necessarily pointing fingers.
That is
earlier
very,
in the
very
conversation,
true.
you said taking accountability, and that's something a lot of people don't do. Please take accountability. Like,
we need to
it's
have
hard.
a whole podcast episode on this, by the way.
It's hard, but in order for any resolution to take place, we all have to acknowledge the role that we played. Because guess what?
Absolutely.
Thank you. As long as it's a dyadic and it's 2 people or 3 people or 4 people involved, you're responsible for one thing in that conflict. So you have to take acknowledgement of the role that you played. And a lot of people.
I'm sorry to interject, because what you're mentioning and saying, Aisha, is such a great point. I think that if we already went into conversations knowing that we played a role and the other person has played a role, I think we would accept conflict as something that is a lot more natural and something that should not be avoided or ignored, or we need to be reactive and defensive.
Agreed.
Because we're like, okay, we're already humble enough to understand that we need to be
flawed too.
Accountable. We need to have empathy. We need to show grace. We need to actively listen. But we also need to focus less on what the other person is doing. Because they are accountable to themselves. You just need to be accountable to yourself. So honestly speaking, I feel like accountability is a big part. Like the top big part
Yeah.
when it comes to dealing with conflict, because unfortunately we really struggle with taking accountability.
We do.
And to be discussed in one of our future podcast episodes, accountability.
Yes. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Okay, to wrap up, because we've had a great conversation. I really enjoyed this, and I'm so glad I wasn't triggered.
Yes.
Considering I came in here excited, but I was like, is something
Not
going to
you,
trigger
like,
me?
on edge, wondering, I hope I don't get triggered.
No, I was like, this may take a because you, Paula, you can ask me one question now, I'll be like, oh my God, how do I answer this? But you know what? With all your questions, I feel like I was able to answer without being triggered. So that's a good,
yes,
that's a good sign of my healing
too, as well.
Yeah, it's a good sign of my healing.
Snaps fingers.
Snap, snap, snap. Okay, what would you like the listeners? What's one or two or three key takeaways you would like the listeners to go home with as they're listening?
I'm definitely going to just hop on what you had said and just reiterate that in relation to the fact that accountability is a key thing.
Yeah.
Conflict is natural.
Yeah.
It happens. The more we realize that we don't have control over it, the faster and easier it is for us to be able to navigate.
Yeah.
And there's books like Set Boundaries, Find Peace by, what's her name?
I love that book.
Nidra Tawwab. And there's another book called How to Be an Adult in Relationships by David something. David is the first name. Give me one. Okay.
What's the name? What's the book?
How to Be an Adult in Relationships. So that's another book, because it's not just about romantic relationships. We're also saying
it's by David Richo.
David Richo, thank you.
Yeah.
David Richo. And by being an adult, it means you also being able to navigate conflict very maturely.
Yes.
That's going to be my own, so to speak, takeaway. How about you?
Oh, thank you for sharing. I like what you said, and I'm so glad that you had some resources ready for us. I think I'm going to go off what you said in terms of conflict being natural. You can't avoid it. It's natural, but just remember that we've talked a lot about being self-aware. Take a moment to be self-aware, reflect on what conflict style you naturally go into in your different relationships. Think about those conflict styles and see if there can be room for adjustment or growth. Yeah. And the biggest part I want people to live with is it's okay to be accountable. That doesn't make you a bad guy.
Yes, actually makes you a good guy.
Yes, it makes you a mature, good person that's willing to take ownership and is willing to look for productive ways to let the relationship grow. So yeah, that's just what it is.
This is a great conversation.
It is. I liked it.
And to keep this conversation going, Aisha, how can our listeners find us?
Okay, you can find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at DWHYA podcast. And you can email us if you had any experience you wanted to share with us, or just your feedback, concerns, anything at info@dwhyapodcast.com.
Which stands for Do We Have Your Attention?
I know, I was like, that email is not that long.
Aisha, it has been a pleasure.
As always, great conversations with you.
Mine.
The player, oh God. The player is mine as well. Thanks as always.
To our next episode.
Yeah, episode 10.
Bye.
Bye.